Here comes Tidy's Bear now. Filling up the grid. Everyone's loaded in quick, and here come the lights. Oh, and 3 jump starts. We got that guy, Kemmons, and Flew, all with drive-through penalties. How rare is that? You don't see that very often. And as a result, there are loads of position changes up and down the field. We've got Kemmons at the back of the field, and there's some debris in turn 1. There's loads of drivers going off at the exit of turn 1, and some debris. I wonder if Pete is involved in all that. We've got Flew dropping down as well. We've got carnage happening through the S section. Drivers going off left, right and centre. We've now got Ross into the lead of the race. Past AMS fairly. Connor has now dropped to P6 behind Cool Assassin. And Pete has jumped from 10th to 7th. What an incredible start to the race. That guy still in 4th after that jump start. Pete looking down the inside of SLR Connor into turn 11, but no giving in there. Mr. Wiggles jumping up from 5th to 3rd off the start, as we see Dayman getting overtaken by Edward and Padge down the field. We've now got Pete down the inside of SLR Connor, and that is definitely a corner cut, so a warning there for Pete perhaps. And I wonder if Connor has some damage. I wonder if that was part of his front wing that we saw at turn 1. No end plates are missing off his front wing here. Cool Assassin struggling with traction. He's already lost a couple of seconds here. There's plenty going on up and down the field, so we do apologise for missing all of that. However, there is a lot happening, and SL O'Connor does indeed have damage, and that will be the reason why he's lost so many places on this opening lap. We've got the top 4 all super close, however. That guy, Flew and Kemmons will all have to serve a drive-through penalty before lap 3 finishes. And 5 drivers into the pits, including Flew and Kemmons, to serve their drive-through penalties. Maverick now was in 18th, now up into 13th with all those pit stops. As for the top 4, they are very close and they are very hungry for the race win. John is up into 7th place of the race. 3 seconds will be added to his time. In fact, not the first. RPR Maverick, sorry, got there before Prev. Let's join with Fairley. Gets a really good exit out of turn 11. Not using his overtake, but the rear wing is now open. There you can see it, and behind Mr. Wiggles and that guy do have DRS as well. And now, will he go down the inside or down the outside? Down the inside goes Fairley on Ross. They are side by side. Ross does really well to defend his position, sling it around the outside there of turn 12. Have to say, hats off to Ross. That is incredible defending. We've got John up into 6th place now. He's passed Prev. Cool Assassin is also losing out to Prev, but still on the back of the Ferrari. And into the pits comes that guy for his drive-through penalty. These top 3 separated by less than a second. Of course, still early doors here. Maverick with his 2nd time penalty of the evening. Needs to keep that track on the straight and narrow if he wants to avoid getting a DSQ here this evening. That means Pete is now up into 4th place. That guy coming out of the pits to serve his drive-through. He's in 11th place here and only a couple of seconds away from the points. So that guy could still come back even with that drive-through. SL O'Connor, by the way, is onto new mediums after that early pit stop. And there goes Fairley past Ross for the lead of the race with DRS assistance. Can Ross hold on to the back of that Mercedes and try and fight back? Mr. Wiggles with a bit of a moment, but but still on the back of the two leaders. And although he's 6 seconds behind Cool Assassin, he hasn't got Dr. Edward in his DRS. There goes John up into 4th. And the question is, can he drop that 6-second gap between him and Mr. Wiggles? We'll be monitoring that in the next 4 or 5 laps, especially when those soft tyres start to deteriorate and lose pace on the medium compound tyres. Ross is still with our race leader Fairley, and Wiggles with a big wiggle out of the final corner, losing a 10th or 2, and he's not got DRS either. Tidiest Bear with a 3-second time penalty. That guy is on the back of Tidiest Bear here. And Pete using DRS to get past John into turn 1. John looking for a switchback. Very tricky, if not impossible, to overtake through this S section unless someone makes quite a big mistake. Mr. Wiggles with a 3-second time penalty, and he is dropping back from Ross. Cool Assassin with now a time penalty. They're coming thick and fast, but only 1/4 of the way through this race. Pete won't have DRS here. Pretty routine move. I'll tell you what, Pete needs to be careful about Prev. That Ferrari wants a piece of the action too. Bit of wheel contact. All harmless. Again, little bits of wheel contact between the two. Pete's trying to stay ahead of Prev. Oh, Prev does well not to oversteer into Pete's side pod. A bit of a lock up there from Pete. He's given just enough space on the exit of 16. Through 17, Prev has a better line. Cool Assassin now lying in wait. It's a good battle between these 4 drivers. John has run off into the distance a little bit. Cool Assassin pits and Mr. Wiggles pits. John is now up into 3rd place, and we rejoin our leaders. Still nothing to separate them. Ross quite content perhaps with just sitting behind Fairley. That guy into the pits for the 2nd time after his drive-through. He's onto his set of hard tyres for possibly the remainder of the race. We just don't know. Padge is now up to P9, our featured driver, having a good start to the race. We've got Flew into the pits, onto the hard tyres. Cool Assassin did pit as well last lap, but he's onto another set of soft tyres here, so a 2-stop is definitely on the cards for Cool Assassin. He'll need to come into the box, to the pits for a set of mediums, possibly in around 7 laps time or 8 laps time. And this lap, it looks like Fairley has dropped Ross, and those soft tyres going off perhaps for Ross. Into the pits now for a set of hard tyres perhaps. Wonder if he's mimicking Wiggles' strategy, and if that's the case, Wiggles could get an undercut here on Ross. We'll have to watch out where Ross comes out of the pits. Indeed, Ross is onto the hard tyres here. Mr. Wiggles could have pulled an absolute blinder here, and you'd have to say that Fairley needs to respond this lap. He needs to come into the pits and set those hard tyres on his car. Ross comes out of the pits at the front of a train, including Appy, Wiggles and Tidiest Bear. So Wiggles couldn't get that undercut done. Pete comes out of the pits on a new set of hard tyres and loses out to SLR Connor. Currently is in AI mode for whatever reason. There's DRS on Appy, who doesn't have it on Ross. And now Wiggles will get a nice run onto Ross here. He's now within a second of Ross, so Wiggles has gained a second in this pit stop phase. Tidiest Bear with his 2nd time penalty of the evening. And Fairley staying out here. I wonder if Fairley is going for a one-stop, a soft to medium strategy. Is that possible? Well, we'll have to find out. Everything racing knowledge-wise is screaming for Fairley to pit and not lose out on an undercut. And Ross driving away now. The move was done in the S section, so John must have had some sort of issue to get overtaken there. And here comes Wiggles. What an exit out of 11. Both of these drivers have DRS. You can see both rear wings are open. John driving wisely there. Braking a little bit earlier as to not run into the back of the Haas. And Wiggles is not giving up on Ross's position here. We've got Edward on the back of Connor. Connor has fresher tyres. That earlier pit stop due to a little bit of damage on lap 1. Prev comes into the pits on lap 9. I wonder what tyres he's going to put on his car. Appy, who is yet to pit alongside John. Dr. Edward defending, putting his car in the right place, but Cummins didn't go for the move on that occasion. Dayman or Greidel both into the pits. Lap 11 of 28, and Fairley has lost a second in the last lap by staying out on these old soft tyres. Is this strategy going to be worth it? Wiggles now with 6 seconds of time penalties, so you'd think that once Fairley is pitted, he's definitely going to get past Wiggles on time penalties at the bare minimum. Appy has now been caught and overtaken by Cool Assassin, as into the pits comes our race leader Fairley. Gap was 17 seconds, so he will lose the lead of this race. It's about 20 seconds for a pit stop here. Bit of a slow release perhaps it looked like from Fairley. Interesting to see if John will beat Fairley out of the pits. You can see Fairley in the foreground, and he's come out ahead of Wiggles, and that is crucial for Fairley. There is no cars now between him and the race leader. He's on a better compound tyre and with a tyre advantage in hand. Fairley, safe to say, has smashed that first stint, but still has to overtake Ross to win this race. It's not over yet, and it's certainly not decided on lap 12. Fairley not using any overtake here. Ross, red light flashing, meaning he's a bit low on energy. Again, Ross using that outside line of turn 12 to stay ahead of Fairley. Twice he's done that in this race. Looked like perhaps Fairley was going for a move there into 16 on Ross, but he doesn't. Wiggles runs a bit wide and almost loses the back end a number of times here. Not enjoying these hard tyres, I don't think Wiggles is. John is starting to drop away from these three, and we will start to see John heading into the pits, maybe in around 5 laps. Talking of John, that's a time penalty for him. And here comes Fairley, again, not using ERS, but just allowing DRS to keep him within striking distance. Ross, on the other hand, I'm sure will be using a lot more ERS to try and stay ahead. We'll have to wait and see, because this race is by no means over. Padge is into the pits for a new set of hard tyres. Oh, and Wiggles a big slide. He's lost out here, and now Fairley is using ERS. He's He's got the rear wing open, and he's got the lead of this race back. Fairley retakes the lead on lap 13 of 28 laps of this race, which is going to give them a massive tyre advantage unless a safety car comes out and allows the front runners to box onto soft tyres too. And Tiniest Bear is out of this race, and mention a safety car, and a safety car will appear. A virtual safety car has now turned into a full course safety car, and actually I would say this now benefits John and Appy, as they can pit now. Very nice strategy, you'd have to say. Very unfortunate for him, and he's onto a set of soft tyres for the remainder of the race. There's no such thing as a commentator's curse, Hyper. Every one of the top 6 into the pits. This is good news for SLR Connor. It's brought him right back into contention here. Prev stays out on those medium tyres, and he will have to settle for second place behind Fairley. Ross is onto mediums, Wiggles onto softs, as is John. As we say, that was good news for John and Appy, who comes out in 8th place. Connor's onto the mediums, as is Cool Assassin. Bit of a risk going on to the softs here. Early pit stop on lap 1. That's why he is down 5. However, this is now a clean slate for all these drivers. Fairley will decide when to go, and he has gone. Mr. Wiggles definitely good in the corners. Fairley breaking the slipstream. Remember, no DRS until lap 3 after the safety car. We've got 11 laps left of this race, in fact 12 laps. And good evening to you, Pilsk, hope you're well. Aries, you were very lucky to not get a safety car in Japan on Sunday night. I think we should leave it at that. Cool Assassin with a 3-second penalty, and that's not going to help his cause if he wants to stay ahead of Connor. Prev is getting overtaken by Ross, and now Wiggles is looking on the back of the Ferrari too. 5 lap older mediums. Prev is rocking on his Ferrari, using overtake to get alongside Ross. Bit of wheel contact. Ross loving that outside line, and he's done it 3 times in this race. Ross has found a way to stay ahead of cars in turn 12, and now Wiggles sticking his nose up the inside, gets a good exit, overtakes Prev, and now John round the outside. This would be absolutely fabulous if he can make this stick, and he has. What a move. John is up to 4th. Meanwhile, while Ross, Wiggles and John are battling with Prev, Fairley is driving off into the distance and has a 2.6 second gap. Of course, Ross and Fairley now need to both avoid, as down the inside goes John on Mr. Wiggles. Mr. Wiggles gives him space on the inside. Mr. Wiggles staying ahead there in turn 1. Looked like John was going for a bit of a sighter down the inside of the Haas, not fully committing to the move perhaps. Still, 10 laps of racing left in this race. Anything can still happen. Not bad. I'm very well, thank you, mate. Very well, thank you. This is the last week of racing on the channel before Christmas, and we're being treated here this evening to some fabulous racing. We've got that guy on the back of Appy. Ogrider is past Maverick for 16th place. Down the inside perhaps, late on the brakes. Makes the corner brilliantly there, and Appy has to just watch as that guy goes down the inside of him. Brev now defending from Cool Assassin, SL O'Connor. That guy now into this fight too. Aside through 13. John has the inside line into 15 and 16, but Wiggles is slinging it around the outside. Not enough room for him, but keeps his foot in the throttle here. And Wiggles is trying to stay ahead in 17. Side by side go the Haas and the Red Bull into turn 18. And John squeezes ahead of Mr. Wiggles. Mr. Wiggles looking to fight back now into the final corner. Side by side, I wonder which one of these two are going to get DRS. It's Mr. Wiggles. Down the inside now, this is brilliant racing between these two. Mr. Wiggles has come out on top. Lap 20 of 28. There's still eight laps left of this race. In all that commotion, Prev losing up to Cool Assassin, and now that guy going side by side into the S section. This is going to end in tears, and that guy had to back out. Oh, and he's lost it. Prev is out of the race. Spinning, crashing. His hopes are over for points this evening. And will there be a safety car? It looks like every driver is past the accident, which means that we may get away without a safety car here. Fairley leads Ross by 4.5 seconds, but the question is, will those soft tyres last long enough to finish the race? Back in with this fight for P3, and John using DRS to get back alongside Wiggles. But Wiggles staying ahead, being very stubborn like Ross. Wiggles defending furiously from the Red Bull. Oh, and a bit of a slide there from John. The more that these two fight, the more that Ross can build a gap on these two. Remember, Wiggles and John both have time penalties, which means the longer that they fight, SL O'Connor could be in line for a potential podium here. And Flew is retired now, and I think there's a safety car out, and he's crashed at the final corner. Flew 32 is out of this race, and also out is the safety car. And this is bad news for Fairley. He had a 4-5 second lead on Ross and looked in prime position to win this race. This is also bad news for those with time penalties. I wonder who is going to pit. The question is, if you pit, you'll lose track position, but you'll have fresh rubber. In comes our race leader. Ross will see that Fairley has gone into the pits, and Ross is staying out. I think that's a good risk for Ross to take. Wiggles is into the pits. John also staying out. SL O'Connor deciding not to pit, perhaps influenced by his teammate's decision. Cool Assassin, that guy, all staying out. Mr. Wiggles, of course, the new tyres on the car will be soft. Fairley is out in 6th place, which means he has 5 cars to overtake if he wants to win this race. They could jump at least 2 or 3 places here and jump into the points at the last minute. But of course, there's still 5 laps of racing remaining. Safety car is in this lap, which means there will be 5 laps of this race left. I doubt there will be another safety car unless something happens on the restart. Ross here will be hoping for a good restart from John. Although John has a time penalty, he will look to overtake for the lead of the race, and SL O'Connor is now brought back into this fight as well. This could be an absolutely fabulous last 5 laps. So, safety car is in, and Fairley is not wasting time. He's up to 5th already. Wiggles has passed Padge on new tyres, and Appy is now past Padge too. Allgreidel is up into 13th place. He's passed Dayman and Edward, although Allgreidel has gone off in sector 1. He's not crashed, so it shouldn't bring out a safety car, although he has, I think he's retired. He may have crashed actually, but he is out. All the drivers are past the incident, which means that a safety car may not be needed here, as Fairley makes his move on Assassin, and in one lap Fairley has gained 2 places. He's only 2.5 seconds off the lead of the race. As here comes Cool Assassin looking to fight back on Fairley here. Behind we've got a big train of cars from orders here at Mercedes. Fairley has led most of this race. Connor has been thrown a lifeline, however Fairley is on new tyres. Can't see Connor letting Fairley past. However, I could definitely see them having a good clean battle here in the remaining 4 laps, which is how long Ross has to hold on. Padge with a time penalty, that brings his total up to 6 seconds. Mr. Wiggles fighting his way up the field. He's up to 8th place. He's up 3 places on the restart. But he does have 9 seconds of time penalties, and that is going to cost him in a few laps' time. Here comes Fairley now and his teammate. Remember, no DRS, he's just using overtake. They're still going side by side here. I wonder if Connor's going to fight back. I don't think he was able to. Or maybe he has let his teammate through. First, his teammate, that was the first hurdle. The remaining 2 hurdles are ahead of him. John and Ross. And when they cross the line, there will only be 3 laps left of this race, as AMS Fairley gets a 3-second time penalty. Did anyone see that coming? I am in shock. That is something that we certainly don't see every week. And Ross can see the top 5 drivers on his screen. So Ross is aware that Fairley has a time penalty. Ross's job now is to make sure that he doesn't add to the 1 warning he had under the safety car. And I think Fairley only had 1 warning too under the safety car. So Fairley in these last 2 laps has got 2 warnings. Very first corner, had to pit early. And this safety car shuffle has brought him right back into contention here. Fairley has passed John for P2. However, there's still plenty of racing left. There's still 2.5 laps here. If Fairley can get past Ross very quickly, you get the feeling he will start to build a gap. Whether the gap is built enough quickly. Also off at turn 17. No safety cars, of course. DRS is now enabled. Down the inside goes the Mercedes on the Alfa Romeo. A bit of wheel contact. All seems harmless. Fairley takes the lead of this race, but has 2 laps to gain a 3-second gap. Ross here doesn't need to overtake Fairley. He just needs to stay within 3 seconds. But I'm sure Ross would love to win it on track as well. Connor is dropping back a little bit. He's now 1.4 seconds behind John, but is in line to overtake John on time penalties. This is a very fascinating end of the race. A bit of a slide from Fairley, and it looks like Ross has got a better exit. And Ross, with the DRS advantage now, is reducing that gap to our race leader. He doesn't go for the move, but he doesn't need to. The gap between Fairley and Connor is 2.2 seconds. So as it stands, Fairley is going to lose out on first and second place. We'll change the graphic to this so we can just see what the penalty situation is like. Also, as we said earlier on, Appy is due to jump up ahead of Assassin and Wiggles. He's only 2 seconds away from Wiggles. So Appy is due to jump into P5. And from where he started, that is an excellent race from his perspective. We're on the final lap of the race. Ross is within a second of our race leader. That guy with the time penalty, he's at the back of the field anyway, so that won't make too much of a difference. Let's also forget Clements and Dr. Edward are due to jump ahead of Pete at the end of the race, and maybe ahead of Wiggles as well, who has 9 seconds of time penalties. Wiggle could lose out on 3 places here. And definitely a place to call Assassin. Wiggles could drop to 9th once all this is done. Fairley has now dropped Ross out of, I was going to say out of DRS, but he has DRS. SL O'Connor now is past John. He was going to get past on time penalties anyway, but now SL O'Connor needs to try and get within 3 seconds of his teammate. He's currently 2.9, and this is going to go down to the wire. It's been a thrilling race. We've seen crashes, we've seen drive-throughs, jump starts, we've seen bits of debris, we've seen unforced errors and pit stops galore, and we've seen a plenty of time penalties. Fairley will cross the line to take the checkered flag, but he won't win. Ross takes the win, and will SL O'Connor beat his teammate? Yes, he will. John comes home in P4 after a great recovery drive from dropping out in the second part of qualifying. Appy, as we said, jumps up to 5th. Clements and Dr. Edward, good clean races on their part. Cool Assassin, Pete and Mr. Wiggles drops down to 10th place from P5 on the checkered flag. Dayman misses out on points. A photo finish. There you see. In the end of qualifying, we saw the 2 Mercedes out in front by quite a way and wondered if anyone could challenge them for the race win. Well, Ross has delivered. He's driven an absolutely flawless race. He got the strategy spot on. His pace was incredible. And due to a little bit of good fortune with Fairley's time penalty, he's got the win.